Coming into this NBA season, our predictions of who was going to win the championship are much different than actual reality. I mean, right now, the most contenders in the NBA are obviously the Warriors, the Suns, the 76ers, and the Nets, and maybe the Bucks too. But look, coming into the NBA season, we did not expect that. Obviously, the Nets were going to be up there, and the Bucks were going to be up there, but maybe not the Sixers, because obviously they didn't have James Harden at the time. But even that, we thought that the Suns were going to fall off because they were so-called, on the better side of an injury-riddled season last season. In reality, I mean, that hasn't been the truth at all. In a somewhat healthier season this year, I mean, they've exceeded all expectations. They're going to be a 60-plus win team, and everybody thought that they were a fluke from last season. And, of course, we saw the Warriors coming back to glory as a good thing, and something that was destined to happen regarding Klay's return and Draymond playing with Stephen Curry more often. But in the end of the day, some of the teams that we expected to contend, like the LA Lakers, are not there this year. We will not be talking about what will a championship do for LeBron James' legacy or Anthony Davis' legacy, because it's impossible. Today we'll be talking about what would a championship do for a certain player's legacy. I'm going to start off with Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry is on the back end of a bunch of scrutiny that is around the NBA. He is blamed for the reason on why the NBA has changed so drastically into a three-point shooting and high-paced league. And he's also on the receiving end of a lot of criticism of him not having a Finals MVP. Stephen Curry, obviously, to me, is the greatest point guard ever. When you look at his peak, his achievements, and his ability to still achieve much in the playoffs, I think he's the greatest point guard ever. However, to many, that will not change until he gets a Finals MVP. He will always be known as this so-called playoff choker and a guy that needs super teams to win championships. Anyway, with a Stephen Curry championship, he goes from the widely regarded, second greatest point guard ever to the unanimous best point guard ever. Magic Johnson cannot match the production that Stephen Curry has brought on offense throughout his career. Now, Magic Johnson is the greatest playmaker ever, regarded by a lot of people. However, he's not matching this offensive output. Magic Johnson played all these years with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I can tell you one thing, if Stephen Curry was playing with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, no matter the age of Kareem, Stephen Curry would have more championships than he has right now if he played all of his peak season with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now let's go to Chris Paul. Chris Paul receives a ton of criticism from the media for not having a championship. He's so-called one of the most winningest players ever, but cannot get it done on the big stage, as some people have said. Now, last year in the finals was no exception. I mean, he actually did crumble in the playoffs, and he was very passive and just did not look like his previous self in the finals. So Chris Paul was on the wrong end of a 50-point game last season.
Shit went bad real quick.
And yes, I think we can all agree that he choked in the playoffs when it came to the finals. Maybe he shot 60% from the field or certain things like that. But let's keep it a buck, man. Chris Paul takes 5 shots a game. So shooting 60% from the field should not be that much of an achievement. Chris Paul straight up crumbled when the lights were the brightest last year. And if you were to win the championship this year, when it seems like teams are more competitive, there are more competitive duos in the league, and there's more health, I think it would boost his legacy more than that finals last year deteriorated his legacy. Because in reality, Chris Paul is one of the greatest point guards ever. We know this, we know his peak, and we know how he stacks up to other all-time greats statistically. But for him to really stack up, he needs to win a championship. And a Finals MVP will boost it immensely. Kevin Durant. If Kevin Durant wins the championship, the amount of narrative around him and being a top 10 player of all time would be ridiculous. He would be taking an 8-seed Nets team that looked dead in the water just a couple weeks ago all the way to a championship. And yeah, he would win Finals MVP. Kevin Durant had, the MVP in a lock to start the season. I'm going to say that even as a Jokic fan. Because of his seeding and because of his scoring, to me, he was the most valuable player. And he lost that just because he was injured. But if Kevin Durant just continues that resiliency and does this without Stephen Curry above all things, then, it will boost his legacy. Obviously, he goes from being known as a snake and a guy who cannot win without super teams to, the second greatest small forward ever? If Kevin Durant takes this 8-seeded Nets team to the finals and wins the championship, you better bet people are going to be saying he's better than Larry Bird. I wouldn't be there to back him up, but those critics will be there. The next situation, if Giannis goes back-to-back, what would it do to his legacy? To me, it would just further prove a dominant player and somebody that we take for granted on a daily basis. Now, to me, I'm a victim for taking Giannis for granted. I mean, all the stuff that he does bring to the sport is stuff that we do not like watching today. Nobody cares about low post defense and, deflections really. Yeah, they like his chase down blocks, but there's somebody else in the league who does that. Nobody really cares for his paint scoring and his little touch around the basket and his piss poor free throw shooting. They want to see 3-point shooting and step back jump shots and dunk on people, which Giannis does dunk on people, but people don't think it's as impressive because of his height. Giannis brings so much to the game that we take for granted just because we don't see it as entertaining. It reminds me of Jokic in the fact that they are both dominant players and entertaining at that, but to the eye of certain people, he's not appreciated. Giannis winning this championship, to me, would definitely cement himself as the top 15 player ever. I mean, his peak is so high to where that no matter what happens in the rest of his career, if he maintains his peak and he does get some longevity, he's top 15, no doubt. I mean, if you're averaging 30, 11, and 5 for multiple seasons, you got to be in that top 15 conversation. The last person I want to talk about is James Harden. Notice how I'm not talking about young players here because I don't think there's much of a legacy that they already hold. For instance, Joel Embiid is a great player, but he doesn't have much of a legacy. He's been on the bad side of, some lucky shots, and he's also just had not good enough help some seasons, like in 2020. But anyway, James Harden with a championship would put him in the playing field of Dwayne Wade. To me, Dwayne Wade is better, but we already know that people already think James Harden is better. If James Harden were to go win a championship and a Finals MVP, I think everybody would say he has surpassed Dwayne Wade. To me, that's something that does not make complete sense to me because Dwayne Wade's peak is better and all that stuff. And also, James Harden has had some of the lows of his career come out this season. However, if James Harden doesn't win a championship, it makes his resume a lot more appealing to people. This guy who's averaged 36 points a game in the past now actually has a championship to prove it. On the low, it reminds me of Michael Jordan. Obviously, I wasn't alive at this time, but when Michael Jordan was scoring 35 points a game in the league, people's biggest criticism about him was that he could not win a championship because he didn't do it up to that point. And James Harden might replicate that ideal. A guy that scored 35 points a game in a heliocentric system where he was just all by himself would then be the best player or second best player on a championship team. I mean, the turnaround would be great, and he would actually be seen as more of an all-time great. A lot of people see James Harden as a great current player and current scorer, but if he got a championship, I mean, he'd be regarded as the third greatest shooting guard in many people's eyes. All right, that'll do it for the video. Make sure to leave a comment down below to where you agree with these people or not. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, watch my previous video on the award races. And yeah, thank you for watching and have a great day. Peace out.
Hey, come on, I got a bag on me. You try to take it, leave you stinking like your last homie. She kinda cakey, little baby, put that ass on me. But I ain't that horny, do you got some cash for me? Why every time you ask him that, bitches act funny. And you keep trying to hold the strap, you won't slap for me. You too happy, I can tell you never had money. Every time you get on live, gotta flash money.